Hey, what's up? Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm so excited about this next topic. We're actually in day 4 of 100 days of daily videos. And I had a whole other topic planned today, but in my therapy session earlier today with a client, she brought up something and we started going down this rabbit hole. And I even told her, oh my gosh, I have to make a YouTube video about this because she's going through a part of her life that I have already navigated. And I know that any woman watching, hello, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. That any woman that feels like they've had to hit a reset without their consent, then this is for you because there is something to be said about starting over as an invitation and not a failure. But that somehow, when we start over, what I often see is that people go to what's most familiar in order to find the sense of safety. And I went the complete opposite direction, mostly at that time in my life because I didn't realize I was a high functioning anxious person. And so running away from my problems was the easiest decision. However, that helped me get out of a loop that I probably still would have been stuck in. And I'm grateful that I'm not, because obviously now I have a new career because of it, and I have a husband and children and friends and some really amazing opportunities that have come my way. And I don't know if all of that would have happened in that sequence had I not done the things that I did. So, for those who don't know me, hello, my name is Brianna. I am first and foremost a 20 plus year licensed clinical psychotherapist, but my career and my job is in speaking. Um, I'm a multifaceted mentor who works with 6 and 7 figure CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business owners to help them move from a place of being stuck in a success within their professional life, but feeling held back, or stuck in their personal life while continuing to create successes in their professional life, stuck in their personal life. Um, it has been a long day, but I'm here. And I help them both with their mindset and like nervous system, but I also do personal styling. So I have these really amazing gifts that I get to use intersexually. Yeah, you know what I mean. Um, and I love it and I'm grateful. But now I'm here. And a part of why I am starting this, I think I shared in one of my first videos, is I just want to develop as an entrepreneur myself. I want to grow. I want to find weak spots. I want to learn where to be more concise. I want to learn to be better. And what better way than to put myself in front of you, in front of a camera, and share not only personal stories, but share things that I've learned and use my wisdom as a teaching tool to help others so that y'all don't have to suffer as long as I did. Because let me tell you, that ish was not fun. So, today, this is for the ladies who have had to hit reset, whether that's from divorce or, becoming a widow. Maybe it's even a big shift in losing your job. I'm going to be talking through the lens of divorce today, but I know that this can be swapped in and out for many things. I have some notes here because there's so much that I want to share, and I don't want to get lost in going so far into storytelling that I don't give you what I feel like is going to be some very helpful tools and tips along the way of our time together today so that you can, really feel unstuck. And like I said, this all started from a conversation with a client earlier today. Um, just some quick backstory information. She's in her, mid 30s. Her marriage ended, and like it literally was like, hey, I want a divorce. And she was like, I wasn't ready for that. And then it was like, okay, I'm moving out. And then she's like, okay, I'm not ready for that. And then like, boom, they just like stopped talking. And so she was living in another country, relocated back to the States, moved back in with her mother, and is in this very weird spot of like feeling stuck and uncertain with where to go next, but also feeling like, um, now unhappy in her career. There's feeling like she's kind of like settling into this place that like she's emotionally numb and not in survival mode, but not really feeling excited or disappointed in anything. She's just kind of there. So if you can relate to her story, then stick with me here, because there's a lot that I know that you can glean from this as well. But if you are recently divorced or starting over, and people keep asking you things like, so what's next for your life? What are you doing? Like, how are you doing? And you really have no idea how to answer it. Number one, that's okay. I feel like we live in a world where everybody's constantly moving fast. And it's like, where's my time to grieve? Where's my time to actually do nothing and be okay with that? Especially as a high functioning anxious person. Back then, it was like I was trying to figure out my next move, what else next? How can I do this? How can I do that? Because I was trying to make up for this huge loss that I unexpectedly had in my divorce. Um, and so, we're told, or I don't know if we're verbally told, but I feel like we are societally pressured to get our life back together as quick as possible. But what if in this season for you, it's not about having it together, but it's about meeting yourself for the first time in a new way? And I want you to think about that. While you might feel like you're stuck, and I'm not going to minimize your feeling of it, the only way to move forward is to look at your situation um, from an unfamiliar perspective. Because right now, just as I did, and I see her doing it as well, is she's looking at her situation from the most familiar setting. She's in her childhood home. She's around all of her friends that she had up until her 20s, when she moved out of the country. She has all the same connections still to people. And so she's looking at her current losses from a very familiar place. And so this is a piece of what I believe holds you back when it comes to moving through um, divorce and loss. So I want to first talk about um, this idea that, ooh, look at that sun. Whatever, we're going to leave it. This is a part of this whole process. Is like, I am at the beginning stages. I'm not trying to perfect this thing right now. I'm just trying to get good and consistent at posting every day and having something to say. I don't like holding this thing in my hand, but right now it feels like every time I clip it, my voice gets further away. Would I like to have a nice camera? Yes. Would I like to have a perfect room to do it in? Yes, of course. But here we are, and I still know that what I have to say is important, so nothing else really matters. Divorce is not failure. And that is the first thing that I want to remind you of, that whether you are the one that asked for it or you are on the back end of experiencing it, you didn't fail. Um, there's a disorientation that you are currently experiencing that is so normal because of the future plans that you had, the idea that you had of this relationship, the belief in the commitment that you made, the version of yourself that is here. And all of those things are a disruption to your identity, and they're a disruption to, again, this perceived notion of where you saw yourself being by this time in your life. And so that's a loss, right? And so when you lose something, when it comes to a marriage, you're losing all of these other things as well. So it's not just saying goodbye to a person. There's the emotions attached to it, the future plans attached to it, the goals, so on and so forth. And I'll share my story here in a little bit, but you know, this is why people stay close to the familiar. Um, it keeps your nervous system regulated. It helps you to feel a little more safe through a unfamiliar transition, because, like, let's be honest, like, nobody has a course or a class that teaches you how to navigate divorce. Like, everybody's divorce is so different. Some are volatile, some are like quick and easy and positive, others include children, like others include major assets, others include no assets. So like, there's no framework for divorce. And so moving through this process is very weird, because there's a lot of emotional safety that gets taken away, because there's so much uncertainty, and there's so much unfamiliar. And I remember when I was going through my divorce, I can't remember who told me this. I feel like it was one of my colleagues, but she said, Brianna, at some point, you need to learn to turn the part of your brain off that had an emotional connection to this man. And you need to start looking at this as a business transaction, because that's where you are in the process of this marriage. When you go through divorce, emotions are gone, and everything about what's happening is now a business transaction. And that really helped me to stop personalizing things that were going on, because specifically for men, like they're good at like turning that thing off in them that makes them feel nothing, and they just go into like problem solving action mode. So I think that that is a big piece of why divorce can be such a struggle, and why it makes you feel stuck and makes you feel lost. I mean, I felt so lost. I felt so confused. um you replay all the things that were said when you got married, you replay all the things that were said throughout your marriage, you replay all of the positive interactions, you ask yourself like all of these silly questions that are trying to gain some sort of access to information and control that you're never going to get, because guess what, the marriage is over. Like, here, this is where we're at. And so there's that management of grief that is both a challenge and a necessity to get through this process. And again, if you're not grieving, then you end up feeling stuck. So I just want to remind you in that process, yes, of course, you can't see outside the familiarity because you're standing inside of it, right? You're inside of it. And that's specifically being targeted to those of you who are maybe in the beginning stages of your divorce. Like, I feel like she is maybe 6 months into the process. Like, they haven't even like filed their paperwork or anything. They're separating and then they're doing all that other stuff. So, like, it still all exists in some way. So, I want to I want to share a little bit about okay. So there were two questions that she asked that I think are very relatable and pertinent that I want to ask you, if you've asked yourself to think about, which is, how do I survive this? And who am I becoming? Because her realization when we were talking was that it's so hard to see outside of what's happening because she's in it in the moment. And so I want the familiarity question would be, how do I survive being in this, right? So I'm going to focus on what's familiar. How do I survive what's right in front of me? But somebody who is able to look past what you're currently stuck in towards what is possible would say, who am I becoming because of this, and where am I going next? And that was a very scary question for her, because she said, like, I don't know where I'm going. I feel so stuck. And I feel like my story, I shared my story with her, and I feel like that gave her opportunity to see outside of herself. And that is my hope for you to take away from this video today, because you can rest in the familiar without building your future there. So I want you to think about that. You can rest in where you're at and not build your future there. So you can focus outside of it and be building something while you're in this kind of like rest and reset mode. So, um, oh my gosh, these dogs, let me tell you, they're going to drive me nuts probably for the rest of my life. And maybe I should just learn my lesson by putting them in their crates and not allowing them to be here. But because I love them so much, yes, I do, but you drive me nuts. I do. Okay. So let me tell you my story. I'm going to give you the full story here because there's a lot of important things to recognize. And again, as a married person, you're probably going to relate. As a divorcee, as somebody who's married and getting divorced, you're going to relate. And hopefully, somebody who's watching this who's single and dating will really be able to take away. Can you please stop? To take away from what I learned, so that you don't make the same mistakes. Y'all, this is Ace. He is my Belgian Malinois, and he is got a touch of the tism. That's all I'm going to say about it. So I met my ex-husband when I was in my early 20s, and he was in his early 30s. We were introduced by mutual friends, and went on a first date, hit it off right away. I was young, and I was really looking for somebody that I knew would take care of me. And although I think I asked the right questions, I realize now I probably didn't. And we dated for almost 5 years before he proposed. And then we got engaged, and we're engaged for about a year, and then we're married for 3, and then got a divorce. And the the crust the crusp of our hole in our foundation was that we did not communicate, and we were not on the same page about a lot of things. We were very opposite of each other, and so combine being opposite of each other and not talking well to each other when it comes to problem solving, conflict resolution, emotions, all of that stuff. Like, how is that gonna like be a thriving marriage? It just wasn't. So um, I am, however, very grateful to him for making the hard decision to ask for the divorce, because I know that I would have never done it. I would have suffered in unhappiness and resentment and stayed in something, because that's just what you do when you make a commitment. And so I am grateful that he was the one that said, like, we're not doing this anymore. At the time, I was devastated and I begged him not to. But I know that he needed to make that choice for us, because I could have never done it. And we both deserve to be happier than we were. So, that was a few years after the divorce that I could come to that place. But now I talk about it and I don't have an emotional attachment. Now, again, I'm grateful because we didn't have kids. So I don't have, once we divorced and had that last conversation, like that was it. We really didn't have to interact anymore. But when he asked for the divorce, we quickly kind of like moved into different parts of the house and tried to avoid each other for a couple of months. And then I ended up moving out and moving in with a friend of mine and her family, which was embarrassing. I felt very embarrassed. Here I am in my mid 30s, and I, have this private practice. Um, I felt like it was starting to like really come off, and it was getting very successful. And I was committing time every week to volunteering for an animal rescue. I had amazing friends. I had a pretty positive reputation in our community. And then I move in to a bedroom because um, at that time I had not been saving money. We were living very much in separate worlds within our marriage, and his money was his money and my money was my money. And so, because he was taking care of most of the bills and things, I took advantage of that and would just go and enjoy my money on my own, and was not responsible with it at all. And so, I didn't really have many places to go. So I moved in with my friend. I was living very ashamed. I was drinking a lot, going out a lot, doing things to try and get my mind off of how I was feeling. And then I knew that this was obviously not going to be long term. And I started to recognize that I could not stay where I was at anymore. Like, I had to get out. Now, again, like I mentioned before, there is no way that I would have stayed there anyway. But being the great runner from my problems that I was, what did I do? I picked the furthest away place from Southern California and moved to the East Coast of South Carolina. Because South Carolina, I packed everything up in a U-Haul with a friend. And then another girlfriend of mine and I packed my 2 dogs and us two, and we drove across the country for about 8 or 9 days. Um, and people thought I was crazy. My parents thought I was crazy. They were actually angry at me. We didn't really talk for the first year they moved out here, because they expected me to move back home. But I knew that I couldn't go back to what was familiar. I knew that I had to do something to shake myself up from constantly allowing people to rescue me in my community, like my friends and my family. I needed to get away to like really clear my head of what just happened. And I felt this sense of freedom to start over and choose like none other. And I wasn't scared. Um, and so when I could have stayed, because of the practice, because of my friendships, because of the comfort that was there, what I know would have happened is I would have continued to struggle to learn about my character, who I was and who I was becoming because of that familiarity. And it wasn't in me to do it. So I packed up my stuff and moved across the United States. Now, here's what's crazy. Applying for licensure in California as a therapist is one of the toughest states. And so the board there has said, you won't have any problems getting licensed in Carolina. It's not as strict, blah, blah, blah. The day before I move, the day before, car's packed up, U-Haul's already on its way out here with my stuff. And I get a letter that says, hey, Brianna, Board of South Carolina is denying you licensure. I'm like, what the beep? There is no way. I have all my plans. I have the home that I'm renting. I have, the co-op practice that I'm working for already set up. And so I'm like, all right, well, roadblock, but I'm still going. So I came out here without any job and started a new business as a coach because I had to figure out a way to do that. I started bartending, working at a restaurant. I did things that were unfamiliar and I did things that were very humbling because with a master's degree in a successful private practice, and I'm not like denying the service industry, like y'all are hustlers and y'all can literally make amazing money, but that's not where I saw myself being. However, it's what I needed to do to get myself to where I wanted to go next. And I feel like what I see in my client and I see in a lot of divorcee women is you get lost in this picture that you had created for yourself, that you end up getting stuck because that picture was taken from you. And you now feel like you have no control over what to do next, when in fact, you have all of the control. And so I want to normalize for you making a bunch of mistakes, making a bunch of choices to get you to where you're supposed to be next. Because when I first moved out here, I picked a terrible city. I picked Clemson, South Carolina. Do you know what's in Clemson? Clemson football, families, and old people. I was a single 35-year-old woman, and the biggest city was about 45 to 50 minutes away. No, thank you. But I lived there for a year. I let myself do some healing work, and then I moved to that bigger city in Greenville, South Carolina. When I moved there, I lived there for 7 years and I moved about 4 different times, not because I had to, but because every time I moved, I found another pocket of the city that I fell in love with. And the version of me that was coming online wanted to be there. So I never felt like I did too much or didn't do enough. I was doing what I needed to do moment to moment in order to really respond to the growth that I was having over time. And that's what I want to encourage you to do. So even though you may be in a familiar setting, wherever it is you're at, you can still respond to the growth that this transition with divorce is asking you into. And it doesn't have to be scary. Um, I feel like I wasn't moving and bouncing around and doing these things because I was lost. I was doing it because I was listening. I was doing it because there was something inside me that said, here is your opportunity to be more free, the way that you felt like you wanted to in your marriage, but you felt restricted from. Excuse me, here is your opportunity to reach more people and be more free in the ways that you felt restricted with a license in one state. So, all of these things were happening because they were things innately that I was having conversations within myself that I wanted. And I want to say that for those of you who, let's say, work 9 to 5 jobs, you still have an opportunity to create freedom. Whether that's a side business or falling in love with your career all over again in some way or looking for another career, there's always opportunity. And again, I know that I'm speaking from a woman who does not have children. That is a whole new ball game, and I can't speak to that because I'm not a biological mother to children. So like I'm only speaking from my experience. Um, Here is what I know to be true. The clarity that you're looking for when you're feeling stuck does not come from thinking or overthinking or ruminating or obsessing. It comes from movement. You have to take action. You have to be able to move in some fashion in some way. So here's what this looks like, okay? You can't rebuild something from certainty. You rebuild it from curiosity. So when you are looking at, okay, I'm divorced, I have to start my life over again as natural human beings. But again, as a high functioning anxious person, I needed certainty. I needed control. I needed proof. I needed the things that I could see. But what I started to learn was none of that was how I was going to rebuild. I had to start rebuilding from a place of getting curious. What would it look like if I moved to the other side of the country that I'm not familiar with? What would it look like for me to start over again in a new city? What would it look like after 7 years of being somewhere to move again? Because I moved to North Carolina after that and to Charlotte. I'm not a city kid. I love the country, but I know it was God, but like my relationship with God had him lead me here. None of this was certain. All of it was out of curiosity. I wonder what the city has to offer me. I wonder how I could expand my name and my brand and my purpose in a bigger place. And so I started to find more of myself in the place of curiosity, of the unfamiliar, versus staying in these familiar settings. And I feel like it is okay to bounce around a bit, especially after divorce. And one thing that my client and I were talking about was, there's this stigma like you're 36, you should have your stuff figured out. You should already, maybe even be considering children, all these other things. And again, those are all societal. Those are all norms that are built around everybody else's agenda. You're not living in anybody else's agenda but your own. And so you will learn more about yourself through these experiences that reveal more about what's next. That doesn't come in all of the planning. So I want you to give yourself permission. Fall and get up. Try it anyway. Be allowed to pivot. Be open to change. Be open to changing your mind. Like 1 year is not a long time to commit to something and then be able to change again. Like it is okay to change. There's something about this status quo of the house with the white picket fence in the family. I didn't get all of that until 43. So your job right now as a divorcee isn't to decide the rest of your life. It's to take the next honest step that feels good for you because you know that you're evolving as a human being after a loss like this, because it changes you. It inevitably has to change you. It really, really does. So I really hope that um, you feel some encouragement and some hope from this, and that you're able to recognize that you're not stuck. There are so many women that are willing to evolve, and it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to step out into the unfamiliar and recreate yourself as a divorcee. And it takes a lot of courage, especially in your 30s and 40s, and then into your 50s and 60s, to take this new identity that is developing in real time and allowing her to lead you into unfamiliar places to really discover what you're made of and where your character is and who you're becoming. So I just want to invite you, if you are in a place of this unfamiliarity and uncertainty and not sure where to go, I want you to start by just being curious. My encouragement to my client was to get on Pinterest, or first to ask herself, if I could live anywhere in the next 6 months that's doable, where would it be? And so she came up with a list of like 3 places. And then I said, okay, so take those 3 places and now go on Pinterest and see what everybody is talking about within those places. And then make a plan in the next 2 to 3 months for you to get an Airbnb in those places, stay for a weekend and go explore and see what it feels like to be somewhere else. Because you can't make a plan from a familiar place, but you can have a familiar place as a landing pad to help you in navigating making a plan. So you really don't need certainty. You just need some sort of momentum to get you going. If this resonates with you, please let me know where you are in your starting over process so that I can encourage you, walk alongside you. And if you're giving yourself permission to explore instead of decide, this is your sign. I'm here to give you that permission to go explore. You don't have to decide anything. And then drop a comment and let me know what it is you're exploring so I can come along for the ride too. Again, my name is Brianna. Thank you so much for listening, and I can't wait to see you on my next video. Mwah.